Hey everybody, today I'm talking about my top 10 smooth board games. So these are the games that do a great job of ironing out the creases that can potentially cause players to disengage from the game. For example, they don't have overly complicated rules, they don't have too many rounds or phases, or get bogged down in fiddly housekeeping or anything like that. So these do a great job of keeping players engaged from start to finish. So at number 10, I have Navigador by Mac Gerdts. Now this is a rondel based game as you are taking actions based on this action wheel where you can move 1 to 3 spaces, which can either let you kind of build ships, that can let you travel along the map, it can let you invest in point scoring opportunities, invest in warehouses where you can buy and sell goods and set up plantations and things, or colonies. It's absolutely a wonderful Euro experience. But the way this game does such a great job of keeping players engaged in the game and keep things flowing smoothly is that there are no distinct phases at all. There are, although there's 3 kind of sections in the game where at one point you the cost will ramp up into investing, doing certain things. It does that in a free flow manner because when certain people get to a certain checkpoint in the game on the map by travelling a certain distance, then all the prices automatically hike up. Which can really affect the flow and the feel of the gameplay and just really do kind of throw a spanner in the works in how people approach the game. A really great game. As I said, no housekeeping at all. It's just a wonderful game where you can invest in different scoring points, different ways of scoring points because you can invest in maybe in focusing on exploring locations or focus on all your different colonies or different things like that. So a really solid Euro game, and I think it's sneaked into my top 10 this year, so that's how highly I think of Navigador, and a big portion of that is because it is so free-flowing and really smooth once it's on the table. So at number 10 I have Navigador. At number 9 I have Istanbul, which is a kind of a middleweight Euro game, maybe on the lower end of that. As you are moving these discs around the board, which is made up of all these different modular tiles. So you have a stack of these discs and you are moving 1 or 2 spaces and dropping a worker off from where you ended up your move and then taking the corresponding action. It's a race style game as you are trying to collect resources and trade them in, trying to collect money and trade them in, all to get these rubies, because the first person to get ruby or a certain amount of rubies is going to be the winner. But again, this game doesn't have any rounds or phases. It's just completely just taking turns until you fulfill the 5 or 6 objectives that you need in order to win the game, and then it will stop right there and then. So a really free-flowing game, one that doesn't ever stop. It's always ticking along nicely. That race element shines through really strongly, and I think a big part of that race and tension is because there is no start and stopping in the game. It's just always churning forward and building momentum throughout, and that's why Istanbul is my number 9. At number 8, I have Architects of the West Kingdom. Now, while Architects of the West Kingdom isn't one of my favourite games, it's a really solid kind of entry-level worker placement game, which you do all the normal things such as collecting resources, trading them in for buildings and so on. And a lot of people will talk highly about certain aspects of this game, which is actually not what I want to focus on this particular speech, really. So a lot of people say, oh, this is great because, the compounding resource gathering. So when you put workers on a certain spot, when you put another one there, you get double the resources, and you put another one there, you get 3 times the resources, and so on. So that kind of forward momentum is really nice. Additionally, you can choose to kind of round up and arrest other people's player pieces if you think they're being too greedy by going to a certain spot. But all of that is great. But the thing that I really took away from this game was that the game doesn't have any rounds or phases whatsoever. It's constantly ticking along because, as I said, when you have so many workers, but when you run out of workers, you're generally going to have quite a few on a certain spot, which means that somebody else is going to round them all up and send them to jail, and you get them back as a certain action, and you just keep playing along. And I think this game did a really good job of that. There's next to no disengagement whatsoever. And I find that with a lot of these, or most of them in fact, probably 99% of these worker placement games, you're placing things onto the board, either taking rewards instantly and then at the end of the round, collecting them all back, or you're kind of laying them all out and then collecting all your rewards at once. Whereas this one, you don't have that stopping at all. It's always moving forward. And again, there's no stopping and starting, no tedious housekeeping, and I thought that deserves high praise, and it's certainly one that holds its own on this list, even though it's not particularly my, I like the game, but it's not one of my favourite games. At number 7, I have The Palaces of Carrara. So this is a game that doesn't really get talked about too much. I think it's not the easiest game to get hold of. This is a Kramer and Kiesling game, another kind of resource management game as you're collecting marble and building buildings. But in this game, not only is it extremely streamlined, but you are always just taking 1 of 3 actions, again with no housekeeping whatsoever, apart from adding a few bricks onto this resource wheel when it's your turn. So all you're going to do is you're going to kind of take resources from this wheel, which is going to fluctuate in costs, at least in terms of the marble you want to get. You're either going to do that, you're either going to build a building, or you're going to score one of your criteria, because you have kind of 5 different cities or 6 different cities, I forget, and you're going to score kind of all the buildings that you've built in those cities, either being points or money. But the interesting thing about this game is that you don't actually have any particular points where all your buildings score. You actually get to choose when you score your buildings, but it has this kind of chicken mechanism where you can only score a certain type of building or a certain city once. And if you do that, then you're going to stop your opponent from doing that. So that's where the tension comes in, rather than being any race in terms of phases or anything like that. It really is player driven, but again with no phases whatsoever, completely free flowing, and no housekeeping at all, apart from placing a few bricks and a few new tiles on the board from round to round, which is completely a breeze. So that's why Palaces of Carrara is at number 7. At number 6, I have Kashgar, Merchants of the Silk Road. So a game that I almost considered putting on the list was Splendor. Splendor, a really popular kind of engine building game, which you're collecting tiles and using those, collecting poker chips and using those chips to buy cards. This one has a similar kind of mechanism where you are kind of building an engine of cards up, but you have 3 columns. And at the front of those columns, you're going to have a card, and you're going to choose to activate one of those cards and then move it to the back of the row. You're going to be using that to either kind of collect resources or fulfill contracts. But again, this is all you're going to do from start to finish. Everyone's going to be doing the same thing, constantly expanding their different caravans, which are these columns of cards, in order to be as efficient as they can, in order to fulfill those contracts quicker than their opponents do. It's a race style game where I think you're racing to get to 25 points. It doesn't take very long, but again, it doesn't have anything that draws this to a halt. You know, you can plan your turns ahead. You can, your turns are over in just a few seconds, and then it will go on to the next person. So it has that real engaging uptime where you're constantly head down in your cards and trying to weigh up what you're going to do next. And again, no scope to be disengaged or lose interest with this game, because it does just keep you on your toes and keeps playing along really nicely, and has some nice satisfying combinations and synergies and things which you can really sink your teeth into. So that's why Kashgar, Merchants of the Silk Road, is at number 6. At number 5, I have probably the smoothest and simplest game on the list. This is Blue Lagoon. But the reason why this isn't at number 1 is because it does actually have, the game is pretty much cut in half, where the first part of the game is played out, everything's taken off the board pretty much, and then you start again. So that's the only reason why it wasn't higher on the list. But still, it comes this highly because the actual time when you are playing the game is so simple and smooth. So all you're going to do on this game is you're either going to, I should explain what the board looks like first. So the board is going to be this map of all these different islands of different sizes, and you're going to be putting these tokens down onto the board, just these little discs, and you're going to be using them trying to either link up the different islands, you're trying to collect different resources for set collection bonuses, you're trying to have the majority by having the most amount of tokens on each building, and so on. So you've got all these kind of very simple ways of getting points that have been used in so many other games, but because it is simply just a matter of placing a disc down, continuing from where you've left off, and just spreading out your presence on the board, it just does tick along really quickly, and all it is just putting a disc down, your opponent does, and so on, and going back and forth. And then halfway through the game, you are going to, an option is to place these buildings down in the first round, and then from the second round of the game, you play exactly the same way, but you can expand from where you left your buildings in the first round. So a slight tweak which can add some quite interesting elements of strategy and give you some nice lucrative spots to try and lay claim to for the second round. But yeah, certainly one of the games that has next to no scope in terms of analysis paralysis, but still has meaningful and interesting decisions and lots of ways to get points. And just a testament to Reiner Knizia's designing prowess, because he does do a great job of streamlining games down to the core. And I think for me, Blue Lagoon is the best example of that. So at number 5, I have Blue Lagoon. At number 4, I have Paris, another game by Kramer and Kiesling. This one came out last year, so I think it's the most recent game from this list. And this is, I suppose, a game of two mechanisms, one being area control, or area majority, and one being kind of a time track, where you have this track, or this line of different tiles, which you can move your piece as far as you want along to get the bonus, but you can never move yourself back. But all you do on your turn in this game is you take a new tile from a stack and put it on one of these cities, and you know where these, what districts these cities are going to go in, but you don't know exactly which ones they're going to be. And then you're going to either place a key on a new spot to either lay claim to, or to kind of invest in a certain spot and get money, and give yourself the option to move your presence up in that region. Or you can choose to jump up from where you already are into the next highest level building, or to the next building, by paying the difference, and I'm trying to get the majority at the end of the round. As soon as there is a number of keys in a certain location, then there's going to be another area majority score track, where you're trying to trump your opponents and get the most points. But again, a game that doesn't have anything else other than that, always moves along nicely, doesn't have any anything to slow the game down, apart from just drawing the tile each turn and adding it onto the board. And I think this does a great job of being a fresh and clean design in 2020, while still having nice core, strong mechanisms, and having enough interesting gameplay to balance out with that smoothness, which just does a solid game in its whole kind of in its entirety. So that's why Paris is at number 4. At number 3, I have a game that I don't talk about very often, actually, but a game that's immensely popular. This one is Scythe by Stonemaier Games. This one is an engine building, again, another area majority style game. I suppose a hybrid between Euro mechanisms and American game style mechanisms, where you are trying to, you basically start on the corner on these big maps, and you're trying to build up an engine, trying to spread your presence out, trying to manage resources to build new mechs, which are going to be used to traverse the board and collect tokens, and lots going on in this game. There's another kind of race style element as well, actually, where you want to be the first to fulfill a certain number of objectives, such as beating your opponent in battle a certain amount of times, or getting to a certain point in these tracks, for example. But what really did stick in my mind about this game is how free-flowing and how smooth it is. Because all you do is you take one of these actions by moving your pawn on your player board into a new region, paying amount of resources, and taking an action based on that. But you are constantly investing in upgrading your board to make things smoother and more cheap and efficient. But a bit like a lot of these other games, that you are so focused on your own player board, you don't get bored on other players' turns, because they are so easy to make a decision and to keep things moving, that you aren't really bogged down by the kind of analysis paralysis of other people. Again, no boring phases or clean-up phases or anything like that. And for probably one of the most involved games on the list, this one does a really magnificent job of managing all the different systems involved without bogging it down with housekeeping or anything boring that's going to, again, cause people to lose interest. So I think that's probably one of the key reasons why Scythe is so popular, because it did such a great job of smoothing out all those edges and just to keep people involved in the gameplay. And that's why Scythe is at number 3. At number 2, I have a bit of a modern classic with Hansa Teutonica. Now, this is, I suppose, a route building style game with another element of engine building, where you're taking one of only a few actions, such as adding cubes onto the board to build these routes. And once you complete a route, you can invest in trying to control these different cities, and you're trying to build up links to those cities, etc. So pretty dry Euro mechanisms. But because you have a real cool economy of keeping resources flowing through your system just by taking simple actions, then again, you don't have to, at the end of phases, you don't have to collect all things off the board and bring them back into your pool and be able to use again. That is actually embedded in the actions you take themselves. And I think that's fantastic. And I think a lot of that kind of elegance and grace of these classic Euro games is lost nowadays. They don't often strike the balance of being smooth and efficient, with having the interesting rule set and the crunchy decisions behind it. I think a lot of them kind of focus on, let's throw as much as we can in the game. Who cares if we have a really tedious clean-up phase and phases and rounds and all those things you've got to manage. But Hansa Teutonica completely transcends that. does a great job of just having quick, snappy turns where you're constantly building momentum and putting things on the board, collecting new regions, investing in your own player board and ramping up and being more efficient at other things. Just a brilliant game, and one of the great Euros really, and one that stood the test of time really strongly. Maybe not going to be for everybody in terms of its dryness. It doesn't have any theme whatsoever. It's not the most exciting game to look at unless you like this kind of dry Euro aesthetic. But still, I don't think you can knock how smooth and well implemented the rules are, and do a great job of just, as I said, being smooth and fun gameplay. And finally, at number 1, the game that popped into my mind instantly when I thought about making this list. This is Concordia, another game by Matt Gertz, who designed Navigador, which was the number 10 on this list. Concordia is another, I suppose, a game where you're traversing the map, building trade posts, trying to manage resources, to buy new cards, to give you more scoring opportunities. But I love the hand management system in this game that keeps people ticking along, because all your actions are dictated by cards you have in your hand. But when you run out of cards because you can't use them back to back, once you play them, they're played until you play another card to pick them all back up into your hand to be able to go again. And because everybody's doing the same thing, there's never a point where everybody collects all their cards together. They're all just invested in their own little engine, in building their own routes. But there's some good player interaction involved as you're kind of stepping on each other's toes and getting other places before other people, making things more expensive for them. But yeah, this one does the best job just because of that card system. And just, again, you can map several turns in advance, has some real deep gameplay, satisfying decisions, great strategies, but still having such an elegant card mechanism, which is just absolutely magnificent. And I think one of the strongest objective designs out there on the market, because it is just a real sign, an example of design finesse. By Matt Gertz, and one of the Euros that I think everybody should try. And I think even a lot of people who don't like Euro games, who think they're boring and dry, whatever, I've never really heard anybody look at Concordia and say that wasn't good, because it really is fantastically balanced, fantastically designed, and a big part of that is because of how smooth it plays. So that concludes my top 10 smooth board games. I hope you enjoyed the list, something a bit different. If you have enjoyed the list, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you check out my Patreon page where you can back just a couple of pounds a month in order to keep the channel going. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.